Well, on Tuesday this week, lots of people were doing things to remember those who have died from COVID-19. There were doorstep vigils across Wales. Some buildings were lit up yellow. There was a minute's silence at the Senedd. There was a national coronavirus commemorative event presented by Hugh Edwards. Earlier in the day, Mark Drakeford said, "Our thoughts are with all the families who are mourning the loss of a loved one. Over the last year, we've heard too many sad stories. Coronavirus has certainly exposed our fears, and especially the fear of death. When we first went into lockdown, I wrote something for our church website about the history of Dowlais. On the wall at the front of Hebron Chapel is the date 1842. That's different to the 1856 date that's written at the top of our building. 1842 is the date of the first building that was on the site. A few years after 1842, in 1849, there was an outbreak of cholera. Cholera is an infection of the small intestine. You get it by drinking water contaminated by sewage that contains the cholera bacteria. The bacteria causes vomiting and diarrhea. Victims would go into shock. They would suffer painful cramps, sunken eyelids and shrivels on the fingers and hands. Finally, the skin would turn blue, explaining why cholera is sometimes known as the Blue Death. Now, for the last year, a great emphasis has been laid on washing hands and wearing face masks. However, I'm not sure they'd have been much protection against disease back in 1840s Dowlais. In 1844, a report describing Merthyr Penderyn and Dowlais said there was no water supply, there were some privies at the few decent houses, but none at the cottages. Slops and refuse were thrown on the unmetalled highways and streets and on mounds of coal ashes at every turn. Merthyr Tydfil with Penderyn and Dowlais may be regarded as chiefly a large cottage town without public care for supply of water, drainage or cleansing. The report goes on and describes the filth so abundant. Well, it's little wonder there was a cholera outbreak. I read this week that one recent estimate shows that overall, on average, about 99.3% of people who catch coronavirus survive. Well, in the 1849 cholera outbreak, only 50% of sufferers survived. Death came to most homes in Dowlais. People were very afraid. You could be fit and healthy in the morning, but dead by nightfall. By the end of August, the daily death toll had reached an average of 36. One historian writes this, "Hardly a house escaped without feeling the lash of this scourge. Some were carried on carts to the burial ground from the midst of the heart-rending cries and sighs of the widows and orphans." The fear of the disease caused many people to consider their lives, to ask questions. Why am I here? What is life about? How should life be lived? What should I do with the time I have? What happens when I die? Many looked to God. In September of 1849, just past the peak of the outbreak, the minister of Hebron baptized 179 people. Cholera or coronavirus or anything else that stops us in our tracks reminds us that we live in a world where we are not in control. We will not live forever. But there is the good news of Jesus Christ. He is the one who came and died. He is the one who conquered sin, which is what separates us from God. He conquered sin and death to bring eternal life to all who will trust and follow him.